Welcome everyone to our Enforce Profitability webinar today. I will start with some introductions. We will then give you an idea of what kind of transformation this offering is doing in the insurance industry. And then we'll go through a couple of case studies with you to give you a flavor for what kind of impact organizations can see from this. So first with introductions, I have Dror Katsav, who's the CEO of Atidot. Dror, do you want to give a brief introduction so people get to know you?
Of course. Thanks. Thank you, Sandeep. Thanks for the opportunity. My name is Dror Katsav. I'm the CEO, founder of Atidot. My personal background is Master's in Information Sciences and Bachelor in Physics and Math, and 11 years in the Israeli Army building data solutions prior to launching the company. I left the Army in 2016 and very quickly started working on Atidot. Atidot was founded in 2016. We moved to the US in 2019, and I'm currently based in California. And Atidot is focused on using AI and data to understand policyholder behavior. And we work with EXL very closely on these programs that we're going to showcase today.
Great, thank you. And I'm Sandeep Manchanda. I head M&A and partnerships at EXL. I've been at EXL about 9 years. Mainly responsible for innovation, first creation of analytical products and then life solutions, and now M&A and partnerships to create new offerings through our partners. My background is several years in insurance. I spent about 15 years at Marsh & McLennan, the CIO there, and then Chief Data Officer at Zurich. So look forward to showing you this solution today. And let me first go through a brief introduction of the transformation, the kind of problem we are addressing and the transformation we are creating out there before going through the case studies. What we find with many of our carriers is that the current process of managing in-force portfolio is still focused a lot on conservation. When a person raises their hand and says, hey, I probably want to lapse, or I need to transfer my policy, or I need to surrender my annuity, that's when a conservation group mobilizes and sees if they can retain anywhere from 5 to 10% and sometimes lower number of policyholders there. We have seen some efforts of proactive reach out, which are based mainly on internal data. Somebody is checking the values very often, going to the site very often, or maybe the ESAT is low, and that also indicates some propensity to lapse. And so there are some proactive efforts out there, but those are limited as well. We have not seen, other than the program that we put together at a half a dozen insurers and piloting with another several, where we use external data, economic factors, the demographics, the life events combined with the internal information to get a fairly good understanding of what the lapse probability is, and also to come up with what we think the conversation starters need to be to have a conversation with this potential lapser in the next 30, 60, 90 days to really take the retention efforts to another level. One of the ways that we talk about, we show the effectiveness of our program is when we run the pilot itself, we do some back testing. We make sure that when we do the prediction based on 2, 3, 5 or more years of data, we actually predict 1 quarter of lapses. And we don't take that data initially. That data is given to us later, and then we compare our results to that, showing the level of accuracy and the hit rate we get in terms of lapse rates. That generally is the starting point. And then, of course, over time, as you add more variables, you add the internal variables, the accuracy level goes up, and we can define very precise cohorts that are going to lapse in 30, 60, 90 days. And the kind of communication, the channel and the kind of communication that needs to be taken on to be able to reach out to those. Now, this can happen from the home office. It can happen through the agent. We can enable it either way through the CRM. And one of the reasons why we can start with fairly high accuracy levels off the bat is that over time, we have 51 million anonymized records of annuities and life policies and disability policies that inform the model to start there. and then augment from there. Uh, the other issue that lots of our carriers find, some of them have even tried to model these lapse rates effectively, but operationalizing it was another big challenge. How do we take these insights? What kind of conversations to have? How do we engage the agents? How does the home office interact with the agency to be able to reach out, or the financial advisor? These have been challenges in many ways that when we combine forces with our marketing analytics team that provides operational resources for policyholder reach out, you combine it with analytics, we're able to put a complete solution in place. So much so that we can even set up a gain share revenue model out there. And you will see from some of the case studies we go through the kind of impact we have. It's a no-brainer in terms of the ROI impact that it can have out there. I think this is the basic information I wanted to convey, but Dror, I wanted to give you a chance to add in anything I may have missed in describing the basic offering before we go into the case studies. So Dror, do you want to add anything to the basic offering before we go into the case studies?
I don't know if you were cutting in and out or I was cutting in and out, but I was just saying that I completely agree. I think the key value that we bring to the table is two things. One is we have the access to the data that is highly differentiated. The models have been trained on 50 plus million policies across different carriers, different product lines, different distribution methods. In addition to that, we bring in the operational capability to take action on those insights. It's not just that we run an analytical exercise ending up with a list. On top of that list, we'll have the capability to support the marketing effort, the contact center effort, the reach out effort to the policyholder to either help drive retention or upsell, cross-sell, or anything that a carrier is interested in implementing in the field. And by combining those two pieces together, it's a full solution for the carriers to be able to go and take action.
Thank you. And actually, there's a question. So if you want to address that, because I think this may be a good time to address the question, is what kind of data is required from carriers for this solution to be effective?
So because the models are trained on such a vast data set, we have the ability to run this, at least at a POC level or the pilot level, on a very, very limited data set. No PII, no first name, last name, just a very basic data request, 8 to 10 data points, depends on the product. That would give us, age, gender, the type of product that you purchased, the issue date, very basic information that every carrier has, and it's not a big data pool for the data team, and doesn't expose any personal information. That data goes into our models. The models are already trained with a lot of historic data, and that gives us the ability to predict very accurately. As we get into the program, carriers typically prefer to add a little bit more data. So we are able to customize and fine-tune the model on the specific nuances of the product or the distribution method or the engagement method to make it even more accurate as we go.
Great, thank you. So, you were adding something before we get to the case studies?
I think it's a great overview.
All right. So I think we'll just start with the first case study, which deals with a life product. I think this will give you a magnitude of impact. So in this case, we had about 1.5 million policyholders, about $1,000 annual premium, and the impact we could create was a 40 million plus, which translates to, as you know, over 50 million or so in commissions to agents to add that premium onto the books. And to be able to retain at that level is a huge impact from the program. Now, in this case, this was a highly agent-driven model where the lapse rates were higher in the early durations, and they were highly connected to some of the orphans where the agent that actually got the policy in was not associated with the policy anymore. So we could tailor the communications and we could tailor the actual campaign around the specific area that we wanted to focus on. Now, in this case, right at the POC level, because of our 51 million records, with the limited, with no PII data set we got, we were 5.5x more accurate than the normal lab statistics out there. So we had a lift right from the beginning, and a very good percentage, over 40% orphan policies showed a very high lapse rate that could be targeted very easily by introducing an agent. So a simple intervention there, creating a big impact there. So this is an example of the kind of impact that can be created. And then there's a question which talks about what is the typical implementation timeline? Like how soon can you expect to see the results? And maybe Dror, you can point that out as to what is the typical timeline for such a case study out there.
So this is a great example. From a timeline perspective, from the point we got the data to the point we turn around models and insights, it takes about 2 weeks. The entire pilot program, we typically size it up as a 6 to 8 weeks, primarily because it takes a little bit of time to get the data. It's a very quick turnaround to come back with insights, but then it takes maybe another 2 to 4 weeks to identify the right retention mechanism within the organization. So with this company, from the point we got the data, very quickly identified the lapsers with the model. But it's not just knowing that this group is lapsing and this group isn't. We were able to break it down to the, in this case, top 5 behaviors and top 5 market segments that we want to address. You want to address younger demographic, different than older demographic, lower income, higher income, orphans, non-orphans, the productivity of the agent, which agents you want to include in the program, and so on and so forth. And we were able to hone in on the exact segments that have a high lapse rate, but also a high retention opportunity because we have the right action to provoke in this demographic. Once we have identified all this, the work starts on the implementation to run the program in the field. It's a quick turnaround in all of these cases, primarily because of the EXL resources that could be deployed to either support marketing or support the reach out in many different ways.
There's a quick question on whether it supports upsell and cross-sell activities.
So it's the same exercise. The model can support both retention as well as upsell or cross-sell. In many cases, the behavior is correlated. If people are not happy with the policy they have, they might be shopping for other products. Typically what happens in the market is when people shop for other products, they go to a new agent, a new carrier. That's what we see from the data. But if you're in front of them at the right point in time, you're at least included in the options, and it increases the probability dramatically that they'll pick a policy from your shelf rather than someone else's. So using that is a great starting point for an upsell cross-sell. Typically, we do like to start, at least from a data perspective, from a lapse behavior, because that's very easy to prove. As Sandeep mentioned, the POC is backtest. So we look at last year's data or last quarter's data. We'll tell you who we think lapsed. You know who lapsed and who didn't. It's much more controlled to be able to kick the tires on the model. And once the model is there and is up and running, identifying the people, many of these actions can lead into upsell and cross-sell opportunities as you solicit interaction with the policyholder.
Right. Dror, you want to take the next case study?
Yes, thank you. This case study is slightly different. This is an annuity company looking at 2 things. One is as policyholders reach their no surrender fee window, if it's a 5-year MIGA, 7-year MIGA, as they reach year 5 or year 7, there is usually a shock lapse. That shock lapse typically priced at 50 to 60% lapse, because that's the point in time where you could cash out without fees and penalties. But in the last couple of years, with the increasing surrender rate, increasing interest rate, we see an increase in surrender rate, because now there's also a big difference between the interest rate on the existing policy versus what the market offers. Previously, People were buying policies with a 2% rate. Now the market rate is more like 6. So if you get an option to cash out without penalties, and there's options out there for a higher yield, there's a lot of money that goes out the door and goes into other products. What this company was interested in, it's a private equity owned company selling a lot of MYGAs and fixed index, primarily via banks, but also through independent distributors. They asked if we can identify who is the right 60, 70% that is surrendering. And if we know that at a very good rate, can we offer them either to bump the rate on the MYGA or to cross-sell into a fixed index? We ran the data, ran the models. We were able to identify about 75, 80% of the surrenders at a 99% hit rate, meaning that the list that we give is almost bulletproof. Everybody on the list is surrendering. So it's even in a case like this, where the natural behavior is 60, 70% lapse rate, it's still a question, which 60% is it? If I pick 100 policies with a 60% lapse rate, 60 would lapse, but 40 wouldn't. And if you reach out to them, you might provoke a lapse, you might create a service issue, they might be happy with the product, and so on and so forth. But if I can tell you who is the 60% that is lapsing and who is the 40% that is not lapsing, now we can build a program just around the 60% that is lapsing. And in this case, the idea is if you are on a 2% rate, you are about to surrender, can we offer you 3 months in advance, 5 months in advance, a policy that is at a higher rate, that is the current rate that we're offering at an internal 1035 exchange. So you don't need to go out to the market and buy a new policy. You don't need to deal with the hassle, which is costly on both ends. And if you don't want a MYGA, there is also fixed index on the shelf that you can buy instead.
Right. So there's one other question. How does our platform leverage Gen AI? And I mean, I can take that on, you can add it on, but based on the explainability part of the model, we know why a certain lapse score is high or low. And based on those variables, we do create a little cheat sheet for the agent or an agent who's making a call as to what kind of conversation they need to have with the policyholder. So earlier we had just what kind of conversation. Now we can actually detail out the points in full sentences so they can actually take that talk track directly from our platform there. Anything to add there, Dror?
Yeah, if you want to show a few examples, starting from slide 8, here's an example to a market segment. In this case, maybe it's a 40-year-old orphan making $76,000 on average, buying a $250,000 face, and so on and so forth. There's about 5,000 of them in the book. They come from this specific states or zip codes or areas. And the idea here is to re-engage with the policyholder, build a personalized approach, and so on and so forth. So you have the cheat sheet for the agent, but this also helps you build, the Gen AI look and feel for this particular cohort and for this particular market segment. The next example is a completely different example. Different age, different income, different policy, different zip codes. And in this case, the idea is actually not to re-engage them with the agent, but offer them other ways to pay for the policy. Change the premium mode, maybe do a premium suspension, face reduction, and so on and so forth to adjust to, in this case, their budget concerns. So it's not just that we tell you who, we also tell you why, and then we help you build with Gen AI the right messages and the right content to put in front of them.
Right. I think the last question that I'm seeing out here are cost considerations. What are the cost considerations in implementing this solution? So I would say that, to start off, the step one is always the POC that establishes what kind of lift our models can get right away and what level of impact can be. And also just generates the accuracy levels that can be achieved in the current portfolio and the impact out there. So we can do that for a 50K POC, which is fairly quick, as Dror pointed out, in the 4 to 6 week time frame, depending on how soon we get the data. And then you saw the cost consideration can also be linked to the value that we create. You saw the example earlier of a 1.5 million policies, which is about $1.5 billion in premium. We could generate a 40 million impact at a minimum, right? That was a baseline there, and we could take a percentage of the premium that could be generated, or it could be on an ongoing regular basis if the activities are taken on by the carrier. Anything to add there, Dror?
Yeah, I think the idea is to create a POC that is very affordable, but post POC, we trust the insights. And I think we mentioned in the beginning that we're open to performance-driven and performance sharing models because we see that in action and we see the impact and we see how it pans out. Part of the reasons for both Atidot and EXL to partner on this is that you can get whatever support that you need between the data and the AI and the marketing automation, the marketing support, and the boots on the ground and project management. We have all the capabilities and resources around the table and can come up with pricing models that are attractive with a very lucrative ROI for the carrier.
I think that's what we wanted to cover. I hope that gave you a good flavor for what our offering is, a couple of case studies, what kind of impact we are having as we convert carriers from conservation efforts to more proactive retention efforts that also supports upsell and cross-sell. Hopefully this was good information for you. Dror, anything to add?
Yes, obviously, if you would want to reach out to us to learn more, we would love to walk you through this, walk through the case studies, show a platform demo, and run through the whole discussion. I believe you have both Sandeep and my contact details as part of this reach out, and we would be more than happy to walk you through this with you and your broader team.
Thanks, Dror. Thanks everyone for joining us today.
Thank you for joining us.